I've been looking forward to today for months. I was afraid we might have to put it off for another year. Cherry trees can be picky about what time of year they like to be planted. But the local urban farming supply store has opened up just in the nick of time for limited, careful business, and they have my order ready. I love this shop. It's called Eggplant. Most of my store-bought plants and all of my maple tapping supplies came from here. They're a real fixture in the community. Even if I can't visit the baby chicks this year, it's an inspiring place. I always leave here with new ideas, and usually a few more plants than I planned on. But today I need to focus on figuring out how to get a good-sized tree home in my car, along with another not-quite-planned purchase. But how could I resist such sweet little strawberry plants when my retaining wall still has a little space left, and there are so many people and animals happy to enjoy the harvest with us? Since this tree came in a pot instead of bare roots, I have a lot of digging to do. I need a hole twice as wide and a little bit deeper than the tree's root ball. The other cherry tree we've ordered will come to us with bare roots, but we aren't expecting it for at least another week, and I want to get this tree safely in the ground before then. This isn't a matter of the trees needing another cherry tree nearby as a pollinator, although if they flower at the same time, they might eventually help each other to produce more fruit. Our tiny new orchard is arranged in a much more family-focused way. I adore sour cherries, for jams and pies, of course, but also fresh. I've never met a cherry too sour for me to happily eat right off the tree. And that's lucky because most cherry varieties that can really thrive in our very cold Minnesota winters are sour cherries. But my wife, who is here right alongside me and is cutting back the roots still left over from the stump that's been in our yard since before we bought the house, she doesn't like sour cherries. She promised me that it was fine, that our cherry crop could be just for me. She pointed out that I don't really like blueberries, and we have 6 blueberry bushes, and I'm not really that keen on raspberries, and we have a whole brambling raspberry patch. Even our vast and apparently growing strawberry patch isn't really more than an occasional treat for me. I've done quite a bit of berry farming for someone who doesn't actually eat that many berries. I planted or helped plant all of them because I know she loves them all. And we've expanded them now because our daughter is the same, she can't get enough of them. But there really wasn't any fruit or berry in the yard that was a favorite of mine, and she wanted me to have that. But I can't think of a sweeter form of competitiveness than trying to outdo one another in what demonstrations of care we invite into and tend in our garden. So, I have my Evans Bolly sour cherry tree, but I also did some research, and I called some gardeners and asked around and finally found a sweet cherry variety that is happy down to 40 degrees below zero, which is apparently the spot at which Fahrenheit and Celsius converge, which I hadn't known before. More importantly for me, it is also colder than the 15 degrees below zero Fahrenheit, which is negative 26 in Celsius, that we usually get in our winters here. I had to smile at finding out its name is Juliet. Even better, it only gets to 5 or 6 feet tall, so my petite wife will always be able to reach even its highest fruit. Now that the hole is roughly wide enough for the pot, plus half again on either side, we can prepare for planting. As with most fruit, at least in my local ecosystem, cherry trees love compost, although you do have to be very careful when it comes to fertilizer, especially when they're young, since their tender roots can tend to get burned by it. Now I can finally attend to the tree itself. After removing it from the pot, I need to prepare the roots. I grew up watching my mom garden. She's an excellent gardener and still one of the people I most turn to for any kind of gardening advice. But the first time I saw her rough up a root ball as a child, I was horrified. It looked as if she was hurting it, tearing at the roots like that. It's not intuitive that to make something grow, you would tear at it first. But these roots have been growing in this pot for a long time. They've been confined. and unless I rough them up, they're likely to keep growing as if they're still confined. The tree won't know how far it can grow. It won't stretch out the way it can now or get fully rooted and stable in its new home. So this is a matter of giving this tree what it needs so it can really flourish here. I pull apart the roots pretty hard. This isn't time to get timid. Sometimes people might even use a gardening knife for this purpose if the tree is really root bound, but I don't think I'm going to need that this time. This tree has been pretty well cared for and it's not that root bound, besides which it's still fairly young. Its roots aren't that big yet. Next, I place the tree, making sure that it's upright and not leaning. You can see how close we were cutting the timing here. Cherry trees prefer to be planted when they're dormant, and this one has started to bud. I'm glad I can get it planted today. Next, I can start to add back in a mixture of the dirt that I dug up and some more compost, so those exploring roots find something nutritious as soon as they venture outwards. Some plants really love to have some room for air around their roots, but cherry trees aren't among them. Every few inches worth of dirt compost mix, I stop to press down the dirt, so that the sorts of bacteria that are most likely to hurt the tree won't have space to take over. I make really sure that I replace enough of the dirt to ensure that the tree isn't sitting in a basin, because while I need to make sure these roots don't dry out completely, especially while the tree is still young, a lot of standing water around its base is likely to cause rot, which could kill the tree entirely. Again, I make sure to tap down the soil to prevent any air pockets. But since my front yard does have an incline, it is very well drained, and I want to take some steps to keep water above the larger root system, including some of the space I want the roots to grow into. So I build a little wall around the filled-in hole, just a few inches high. This will help water not to drain away too quickly and will help keep the mulch in place. It sort of reminds me of building a sandcastle. I always put little walls around my sandcastles when I was a kid, trying to keep the water out. Except obviously this time I'm trying to keep the water in. I happened to find a little bit of history about this kind of tree. Apparently for years, the common wisdom among Canadian settlers was that you couldn't grow cherry trees in the Canadian plains, that the weather was too cold. The problem with that being that there was already an orchard of them growing just fine in Alberta, and had been doing so for decades. Somehow this wasn't common knowledge until a farmer contacted a horticulturist, a Dr. Evans, saying that her orchard was going to be cut down and asking him if he'd like any samples from any of the trees. He took cuttings and propagated them. I find it a bit odd that Discovery was named after him, but at any rate they quickly became popular for their abundant and delicious fruit, which I am excited to try. Next, I add some of that wonderful smelling cedar mulch, several inches thick around the whole area. The tree won't need this when it's older and better established. Certainly my home is better known for floods than droughts, but for now we can baby the newest addition to the garden a little bit while it gets settled in. Even with rain in the forecast for tomorrow, I'm just going to give this one drink of water today, just to be extra sure. It certainly won't hurt. I'll be sure to let you know how they're doing later on, but before I finish, I wanted to show you that the honeyberry bushes are finally in full flower for the first time since we've had them. I think this is the year we'll finally get a crop. Now I'd better get off to plant these unexpected strawberries. I hope you have a wonderful, fruitful day. I'll see you next time.